There was an unwritten clause in Anne Beaulieu's marriage vows, a hidden condition. She had made a Faustian pact with her jealous fiancé in exchange for her newfound security. She agreed to obliterate all evidence of her first marriage. It was to be as if Jimmy Wagner had never existed. His family, by extension, would cease to exist as well. And that, to me, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that is the ultimate shattering of someone's identity, because think about it. That is half of who his now new stepdaughter is. Jimmy and his family are half of Priscilla's identity. And to deny Priscilla that is just unbelievably just selfish and heinous, in my opinion. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jennifer, so happy to have you back for my book read, Child Bride by Suzanne Finstad. This is the untold story of Priscilla Beaulieu Presley. In the last episode, we read the author's note, the very beginning of the book, which is juicy in of itself, and then we also read chapter 1. And now in this episode, we are getting into chapter 2, the secrets begin. In chapter 1, we learn about the origin story of Priscilla, the circumstances regarding her birth, and we find out that she was not born a Beaulieu, the name that she had at the time she met Elvis in 1959 when she was living in Wiesbaden, Germany. She actually was born Priscilla Ann Wagner. So if you want to find out why she was a Wagner and not a Beaulieu, you'll have to go back to that episode, and I will link it somewhere here or in the description. But for now, let's get going in chapter 2. Now, chapter 2 in Child Bride is called The Secrets Begin. The Wagners got their first glimpse of their only grandchild when she was less than a month old during one of Jimmy and Anna's stopovers in Titusville. Even Jimmy's teenage brother, Gene, couldn't get over how happy his little niece was. Jimmy and Anne, she had dropped Anna, chose the Wagners Church, St. Paul's Reformed, situated at the top of a hill up the street from the Titusville Library, for Priscilla's baptism in August. After the Sunday service, the family drove back to the Wagner place, an old-fashioned farmhouse, to gather on the front lawn for pictures. Gene did the honors, capturing his older brother and Anne standing side by side, holding Priscilla between them. Anne is smiling blissfully at Jimmy while he beams at the camera. He is dressed in full uniform, standing military straight, flashing his matinee idol smile as Priscilla bobs her head out of a white christening blanket. Within weeks, Jimmy received orders to report to the Fighting 75th aboard the aircraft carrier USS Roosevelt, stationed in Virginia. Jimmy pulled his parents aside. "Now, if anything should happen to me," he instructed, "I want Rooney to have my car." Catherine Wagner didn't give it a second thought. The war was over. Her darkest fears about her son's safety had not materialized. These were Jimmy's glory days. Anne and Priscilla whiled away the autumn in New London with the Iversons, while Jimmy stood by near Norfolk. When his orders arrived in early November, he persuaded one of the other pilots to accompany him in a single-engine two-seater for a training flight to Groton. He wanted to spend a farewell weekend with Anne and Priscilla before shipping out for the South American coast near Rio. Anne expected Jimmy at her parents' house by 10 that Saturday morning. Excitement gave way to worry, and then fear, and finally panic, as the late afternoon wore into nighttime. "I think both of us, we didn't really say too much," recalled Faye. "We didn't talk about it." Around 8 o'clock, Anne rang the Wagners, deeply worried, wondering if they had received any word about Jimmy. Her mother-in-law said no and reassured her that Jimmy would arrive any minute. Anne and the Wagners spent a desperate Saturday night and all-day Sunday hoping, praying for word from Jimmy. At 5:30 p.m. on Sunday, they received a curt telegram from the Navy informing them that James Wagner had been killed in an airplane crash on Saturday. Jimmy and his co-pilot had flown into a heavy snowstorm as they approached the foothills of the Berkshire Mountains near Wingdale, New York, where they became lost in a fog. A hunter who lived in the area saw the two-seater crash upside down against East Mountain on Saturday morning. It took New York State Police and local residents until Saturday night to make their way through the snow and underbrush to recover the bodies of Jimmy and his co-pilot. Anna was in a stupor, her cousin Margaret recalled. Lorraine Iverson called that Sunday, asking Margaret to come over and comfort her daughter. The house was like a tomb. Nobody said too much. What can you say? The Iversons, who had softened toward Jimmy since the wedding, gathered in Titusville with the Wagners for the funeral. The local paper noted that Jimmy had attracted the largest number of mourners ever to call at the Flanders Arnold funeral home. Priscilla's father's memorial service befitted a military hero. James Wagner was buried in a white uniform, encased in a metal casket sealed by the government and draped with the flag of his country, saluted by a firing squad. Catherine Wagner was inconsolable. Jimmy was her heart, her soul, her favorite son, for whom his smiling face was like the sun coming out, as she had put it. Jimmy was, well, he was just about perfect, his mother took to saying, too perfect for this earth. After the memorial, Anne and Priscilla stayed on in Titusville for almost 3 months, living with the Wagners past New Year's. Having their daughter-in-law and granddaughter near them was a source of great consolation to Jimmy's parents. Anne and the baby were here for Priscilla's first Christmas, Catherine Wagner recalled. We had a Christmas tree and made things as nice as possible, but there was a deep grief on both sides. Very, very bad. As far as the Wagners were concerned, everyone in the household got along beautifully. I dearly loved the girl, Catherine Wagner remarked later. Jean and Anne grew particularly close. At 19, Anne was just 2 years older than Jimmy's brother, Jean, who was then a senior in high school. I couldn't have asked for a better sister-in-law, related Jean. Priscilla, at 8 months, was the apple of everyone's eye, more so than usual perhaps, because she was their lifeline to Jimmy. By the middle of January 1946, it was time for Anne to return home. She had lived with the Wagners in a state of suspended emotion. She was a bride, a mother, and a widow within a year's time. She and the baby moved in with her parents, while Anne sleepwalked through a series of dead-end jobs. She was lost for a long time, her cousin Margaret reflected. Anne often wrote to Catherine Wagner, filling her in on Priscilla's progress, but also complaining of dizzy spells, weight loss, and a deep depression. Rooney was a very vibrant person, recalled her friend Faye, and she had a terrible time accepting the fact that Jimmy had died. That year, Anne took on a secretarial course, realizing, as she wrote Miss Wagner, that she was responsible for supporting Priscilla. By summer, Anne had recovered from the extremes of her depression, and she rallied when she found a clerical job in the business office of the University of Connecticut. Priscilla was her salvation. She had been blessed with a beautiful child, Jimmy's legacy to her. Anne channeled her grief into complete absorption with her daughter. She fussed over Priscilla's clothes and hair, dressing her in frilly frocks and Gibson girl blouses, arranging her baby brown hair in a cube-high curl. Priscilla seemed born to play the part. "Isn't she a little doll?" strangers would remark. Anne's devotion gradually turned to ambition. She took Priscilla to a photographer for studio portraits and avidly studied the results. Soon, she was entering her daughter in baby contests, then children's beauty pageants. Anne focused her ambitions on Priscilla. The resulting mother-daughter relationship was intensely symbiotic, and both knew that the key to their success was Priscilla's appearance. The lesson for Priscilla was clear. Looking pretty was her raison d'être. By the spring of 1948, Anne wrote her mother-in-law that she was disgusted with drifting from job to dreary job and frustrated that 2.5-year-old Priscilla had no yard to play in. She was longing to stay at home so that she could devote herself full-time to her daughter. Around this time, she met a former Marine who was taking a business course at New London Junior College. His name was Joseph Paul Beaulieu, Jr. Paul, as he was usually called, came from a Catholic family in the neighboring town of Groton and began keeping company with Paul Beaulieu. Not mention her new suitor to the Wagners when she visited them that May to celebrate Priscilla's 3rd birthday. Anne and Priscilla were regular guests at Jimmy's parents' house, so much that the neighbors across the street named their baby girl Priscilla. Jimmy's little daughter charmed everyone in sight. Perhaps Anne avoided talking to the Wagners about the new man in her life because Paul Beaulieu, according to her favorite cousin, was jealous of Jimmy. Anne confided this piece of information to Margaret after she and Paul began dating. Jimmy Wagner, by everyone's account, was the great love of Anne's life. Her relationship with Paul Beaulieu was different. "I guess she was in love with him," Margaret mused. "But you know, after Jimmy, Paul just couldn't compete. Paul's Paul." Physically, he was not in the same league with James Wagner. He was tall and dark, but decidedly average-looking, with brown eyes and heavy brows that drooped slightly, giving him a basset hound quality. What Paul Beaulieu did offer was security, stability, and an opportunity for Anne to quit her job and focus on Priscilla. Paul Beaulieu particularly enjoyed having Anne's little daughter by his side. He liked the attention he got being with Priscilla, Margaret noted, because she was so beautiful. Now, that's not a good sign to me. Why Paul would feel jealous or threatened with a dead man, to me, speaks of someone who is very, very mentally unstable. You've got to have some serious self-loathing and self-respect issues to feel like that. I mean, that right there tells you that this isn't probably going to be a happy marriage. And then again, remember the way that Anne is accustomed to living her life, secrets, not really telling much about what's going on internally with her emotions. Also, I mean, not telling Jimmy's parents, the grandmother and the grandfather of her little girl, that she's now seeing someone new. I mean, why would she not tell them that? I mean, obviously she's still a very young woman with a small child. Jimmy's parents, by all accounts, seem to be very nice, hospitable, gracious people. I don't think that they would have bemoaned it or, been angry at Anne for wanting to go out with somebody, but maybe she felt that the more that she would disclose about what she was doing to Jimmy's parents, that maybe that wouldn't sit well with Paul. So she's just maybe figuring that she'll just keep them separate. It's almost like keeping those two lives separate. But yeah, I never like hearing about people that are jealous and people that want to hold people and almost see them as objects. That's always huge red flag. Okay, so she's not telling the Wagners, her dead husband Jimmy's parents, that she is now seeing Paul Beaulieu, and she's already, meaning Anne, disclosed to her cousin Margaret that he's jealous of Jimmy. And she's getting closer to Paul because he's offering her what she wants, which is security, stability, an opportunity to stay home and focus 100% of her attention on Priscilla. And then it seems like Paul really likes Priscilla too, because he likes all the attention. Anne wrote to Catherine Wagner in August that she planned to remarry, but she did not say to whom or when. Jimmy's mother responded immediately, "Be sure and bring your husband and come visit us, and bring Priscilla." What did I tell you? See, they seem like very, very nice people. But again, it just doesn't seem like she wants to bring Paul Beaulieu into her old life, essentially. Anne Wagner married Paul Beaulieu on September 11th, 1948, in a big Catholic wedding in Groton. Priscilla's paternal grandparents did not receive an invitation. In fact, unknown to them, the Wagners were being systematically eliminated from the lives of their granddaughter and Anne. There was an unwritten clause in Anne Beaulieu's marriage vows, a hidden condition. She had made a Faustian pact with her jealous fiancé in exchange for her newfound security. She agreed to obliterate all evidence of her first marriage. It was to be as if Jimmy Wagner had never existed. His family, by extension, would cease to exist as well. And that, to me, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that is the ultimate shattering of someone's identity, because think about it. That is half of who his now new stepdaughter is. Jimmy and his family are half of Priscilla's identity. And to deny Priscilla that is just unbelievably just selfish and heinous, in my opinion. Anne began lying to her daughter, telling Priscilla that Paul Beaulieu was her father, and Paul basked in the association. Jimmy Wagner, her true love, became a dark secret that Anne had to keep from everyone, even his own daughter. Priscilla was a guest at the wedding of her parents at Sacred Heart Church. Anne and Paul assumed that Priscilla, at 3.5, was too young to know the difference. Shortly after marrying Anne, Paul Beaulieu enlisted in the Air Force and started advanced pilot training, just like Jimmy Wagner. That December, for Priscilla's 4th Christmas, Catherine Wagner sent her granddaughter a bundle of gifts, though she hadn't heard from Anne since receiving a telegram over a year earlier notifying the Wagners of her remarriage. Interesting that Paul would go into the exact same field and occupation as Priscilla's dead father, the one that he was crazy jealous of. Interesting. Anne, perhaps regretful of her need to cut all ties with Priscilla's grandparents, sent Mrs. Wagner a thank you note for the Christmas gifts and a card announcing the birth of her second child, Donald Paul Beaulieu, born December 30th, 1949. It was in this letter that Anne told Jimmy's mother they were moving to Texas, where Paul would be stationed as a navigator bombardier. In closing, She thanked Catherine for the Christmas gifts and promised to write again soon. Catherine Wagner never heard from Anne again. Anne Beaulieu was driven by fear of how Paul Beaulieu would react if she mentioned Jimmy or his family. The fear intensified when she and Paul had their first child. Was that all there was to the story? What was Anne so afraid of? Whatever the real reasons were, Anne kept them to herself, but the fear was there and it was powerful. So powerful that Anne made a decision soon after Donald was born. She would never again contact the Wagners, depriving her daughter of her paternal grandparents and separating Jimmy's parents from their only grandchild. Priscilla's real father, Anne's true love, was a forbidden subject as long as Paul Beaulieu lived. On April 17, 1950, Paul Beaulieu formally adopted Priscilla Ann Wagner. The perfect porcelain doll was now his. It had to torment him that her face, the face everyone commented on, belonged to his dead rival. That is some deeply twisted trauma. It sounds like Paul Beaulieu's going through there. Yikes. The Wagners had no idea their son's only child was now Priscilla Beaulieu, or that they had been deliberately expunged from her life. Catherine Wagner tried to send a baby gift to little Donald, but had no idea where in Texas Paul Beaulieu was stationed. Letters she wrote to Anne at her last known address were returned unanswered. Months passed with no word from Anne. Jimmy's mother tried writing Anne in care of her parents in Connecticut. We worried and didn't know what to do, but I didn't receive any answers. Several years passed, and the Wagners grew desperate. We didn't know for sure whether Priscilla was living or not, explained Catherine Wagner. They just seemed to disappear. This is so heart-wrenching, you guys. I mean, can you believe just completely separating the Wagners from their only grandchild and the grandchild of their beloved dead son that was taken from them? And it's so terrible. This is awful, awful. The Wagners decided finally to consider legal action to resume contact with their missing granddaughter. They made an appointment with an attorney, but the night before the consultation, he suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and died. The God-fearing Wagners took that as a sign. Everything seemed to be against us. We thought, there's a reason for this. If we're supposed to meet her or hear from her, we will. The Wagners, who considered Priscilla kidnapped, carried on with their lives heartbroken. They had already lost Jimmy, now their darling grandchild. For Jimmy's mother, the hardest part of losing Priscilla was the little things, her sweet smile. But I have those good memories, she would console herself. I have those. And she had the other Priscilla, the little girl across the street, named after her granddaughter. Catherine Wagner also had a premonition, a feeling that some way, somehow, I would know where she was. Okay, you guys, that is the end of chapter 2. Oh, God. I was getting choked up there a little bit. That is just so unbelievably heartbreaking because it's not like it is now. You know, everyone broadcasting every second of their lives online, on social media, instantaneous email, digital everything. Back then, you could write letters, letter after letter. And if they went unanswered, you just wouldn't know. And then to hire that attorney and have that attorney die suddenly in the night like that, they were probably just so grief-stricken that everything was a sign to them. And I'm sure, the tragic way that they lost their son and then to have everything went down the way it did. Wow, I cannot imagine. But that is the end of chapter 2, you guys. That one was called The Secrets Begin. The next chapter of Child Bride is going to be chapter 3. It's called Priscilla, Little Girl Lost. Learn about Priscilla's childhood. We're going to learn about everything that led her to Wiesbaden, Germany, where she meets Elvis in 1959. We're going to see about Priscilla and how she moves through the world and how the way that Anne's personality and the way that Anne's psyche helped her make sense of her world by, keeping secrets and living in fear, how that really starts to manifest and take hold in Priscilla as well. Priscilla was very much like Anne in the sense that I think she really felt like she couldn't be herself fully with other people, that she had to present a persona at all times, similar to the way that Anne did. And it's unfortunate that Anne felt that way, chapter 1 talked about her Norwegian upbringing, about how her parents were very secretive and didn't really like to talk too much about the past or where they came from and their family tree in any great depth. So I think that's what Anne learned and carried with her. And that's really sad, because you would think that when Anne met the Wagners, met Jimmy, met his parents, the way that they opened up their home to her, they opened up to her, they embraced her, they seemed very kind, very gracious, very loving people. You would think that she would kind of just want to assume more of that into her life, and to make sure, because they were such wonderful people, to keep them in her daughter's life and to keep that connection. But I guess just the idea of just having safety, having security, not having to work, essentially, and the price she had to pay for that drive was stronger than the drive, of maintaining a relationship with the Wagners. So in essence, she's gaining, but Priscilla, her daughter, is losing, and losing big. She's losing her identity. She's losing part of where she came from. All very sad, but we're going to see how this mindset and this, keep secrets secret mentality carries on into Priscilla's life. So I can't wait to see you guys in chapter 3. Let me know what you think about the book so far, and I will talk to you very, very soon. Bye.